Hello there. My name is Kevin Lewis, and I am director of You Got This, which means that I am running the show that you are watching this event at. A few speakers let us know that they couldn't make it, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to share some of the things that I learnt through freelancing and running my own agency, both validating and debunking some of the assumptions and thought processes that I had. In the hopes that I can save you some of the pain that I went through and put your best foot forward when starting to freelance. This talk is going to go right through from considering freelancing and the questions you should ask yourself to know whether it will actually fulfill your needs, right through to deciding freelancing is no longer for you once you've been doing it for a while. And I think that this talk is particularly important at this point in time, at the beginning of 2023, because we are several months into what feels like a never-ending slate of layoffs, and it is forcing a lot of people to consider whether freelancing is a path that they should pursue. So with that, let's get started, and we're going to start with getting set up and deciding that this is something that you want to do and how to get started. And the first thing to ask yourself is, what is your motivation? Why are you considering freelancing in the first place? Now, at this point in time, you may feel your hand is forced because you are struggling to find jobs in the current market. But putting that aside, in the world where you do have a choice, you may be thinking that by pursuing the freelancing route as opposed to working for someone else, you will allow yourself the variation in the work that you do. It is not everyone's style. It is certainly not my style to be working on the same thing for 40 hours a week. But you can get that experience with full-time employment through work agencies. Agencies take on a whole bunch of projects, and when they are done, you will be reassigned to a new project. So you may find yourself being able to kind of meet this motivation of a varied workload through working for someone else. You may also want the notion of being your own boss. And I'm kind of here to tell you that until you build some confidence through experience and authority, you do have a boss. And that boss are your clients. And you're probably also going to be at the point where you have a little less confidence about how to manage those clients, which could make the relationship a little bit strained. So just know that you should kind of set out your motivations, but know that many motivations can also be met by full-time employment. But hold on to this motivation because we'll come back to it later in this talk. I also want you to know when you're starting out that you don't have to go all in. You can start slow. You can do a little bit of work, a few hours, a week, rather than jumping in for 40 hours a week. The muscle, the skill to sell and have a consistent stream of work took me a good 5 years to build. And in that time, freelancing as my main source of income was an incredibly stressful endeavor. So what we talk about in freelancing or any type of sales work is that you build a pipeline, you build a set of conversations that you believe some of them will turn into money. So you want to build a really solid pipeline before you start relying on your freelance work for income. So it's okay, again, to kind of have a day job that pays your bills, pays your rent, pays your mortgage, buys your food, does what you need, and then earn some supplementary income freelancing. And then when you started to earn enough that it is viable, you flip the switch, and now you can do that full time because you have this consistent income kind of setup. You also need to understand and accept all of the skills that you will need. When you work at a company as a software developer, there are a whole bunch of things that you don't need to do in order to make the business successful. You have a part to play, but there are a whole bunch of extra skills that you need to employ as a freelancer. Not only the delivery of projects, also remembering that you might not have all the skills you need to deliver on every kind of project that you take on. But you're going to need to do sales work. You're going to need to do chasing clients for payment if they are late. You need to manage the relationship with your clients. You need to do some accounting and bookkeeping. You need to put together contracts and have people sign them. You need to manage your project and make sure your client understands that. And so there are all of these additional skills that you will need to do as a freelancer. And we'll talk about this again in a little bit. So before you kick off, you need to spend some time, unfortunately, and get all of your ducks in a row. And you need to ask yourself a few questions and set up a few things. Firstly, you need to be really clear in your value proposition. What do you do? Because at this point, it is possible that you will have kind of shallow knowledge in a bunch of different areas. But that is really difficult to sell to clients until you have more experience. So you want to focus down to just one or two areas where you are specialist and you can talk about your skills, in a little more with a little more certainty. You should also understand what you know and what you're willing to learn to do a job, and in turn, what is beyond the scope of what you're willing to learn to deliver a job. And this is really important because our discipline as software developers means you will have to learn something for every single job, every single gig that you do. And if it's too far from where you are today, if the amount you need to learn is too great to deliver on a project, you are becoming a liability to yourself and to your client. And so then you ask yourself, okay, well, I understand that I'm a front end developer, for example, and this work has a heavy back end component, server side component. Can I subcontract this work out to other people? Can I find someone else and pay them a portion of what I'm being paid to deliver on that part of the work? You also need to get some examples of your work together. And if you're a student, which is where I originally gave this talk for context, if you are a student, just remember that your uni projects are okay, but try and omit them where possible. Unfortunately, lots of clients will see student and they will either downplay your ability or think they can pay you less than your worth. So you want to put your best foot forward as the professional that you are. And that may mean needing to curate your work a little more carefully. You also, in terms of accepting and understanding all the skills you need, the last slide we were on, you want to structure your work. You want to set up routines and block your calendar to do things like sales work and finding new work, to do things like admin, and try and have tools in place that help you do this and be as organized as possible. The next thing you need to do to get started is to set your rate. Now, I did some research. In March 1st, 2022, Glassdoor said that the average base pay for a software engineer in London was about £53,000. The numbers are relevant, but you'll see what I'm going to do with that number. £53,000 a year, rather, sorry, £53,000 a year is about £4,400 a month pre-tax, which works out to about £200 a day. So you may be tempted, fine, I want to earn the average 53 grand, so I'm going to make my rate 200 a day. But this assumes 100% of your work time is working and you have it booked up, which is also unrealistic because you need to do sales and admin as well. You don't get sick days as a freelancer. You have to buy your own equipment. There are extra bills incurred. There are insurances you should take out. So I'm not here to tell you what your rate should be, but you need to consider all of these things when setting it. My first day rate was £250. It was way too low. I also was struggling to fill all of my time. I didn't earn nearly enough. When I ran my agency, our very first day rate when I was, fresh to doing this was £300 a day. And it was so low, I had to do 1.5 days of work for every day we were paid for, which was leading to 70, 80-hour weeks. It was just completely unsustainable. I want you to get this right. It's, again, not my job to tell you what your rate is, but if you want to have a chat with any of this, I'm happy to chat with you after this event. Also recognize everyone's circumstances are different. Your need for an amount of income will be different for each person. You need to factor that into your rate as well. And then finally, if you're a little earlier career, and this is a little delicate, and I feel weird because this is almost at odds with the message You Got This puts out, but there is a shortage of skilled talent as software developers. Even now in this climate, there is a shortage of skilled talent. But if you are at the beginning of your journey, there are a lot of people at that point. So you have competition. And this is where side projects and open source contributions, things you can point to that make you different from the next person, are useful, with the full recognition that not everyone has the privilege to spend that time. You just need to know that if you don't have the time and you don't have this kind of experience, this is something you need to just be aware of as you're entering conversations. Next. Know where your strengths are and know where your strengths aren't. Earlier on, I said there are a whole bunch of skills that you need to employ to be a successful freelancer. One of those points I gave you was accounting. Do you want to know what you should never do yourself? Your accounts, because your accountant is a specialist who will almost always save you more money than they cost. And it's always difficult to put down money when you don't have money to start. But they almost always will make you more or save you more than they cost you. Where you are not a specialist in a thing that is complex, consider just owning it and saying, I don't know that thing, and paying someone else to do that work for you. Next, get insurance. Get insurance. There are a whole bunch of different insurances for freelancers. Clients not paying, right? Or there being a dispute about the quality of your work, or at worst that your work has caused some loss to your client and they're trying to come for you. There are insurances in place to save you. This is not legal advice. I am someone who is chronically overinsured because that is the kind of person I am. I have a low risk tolerance, but where it is your main income, you really don't want to mess around. So consider at least researching the different kind of insurances that exist for freelancers, and consider purchasing insurance that is appropriate for your risk tolerance. There you go. That is my non-binding, non-advice version of this statement. Okay, your first few projects. Absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Your first 10 projects will be rough. They'll be rough. You'll be learning how to do everything beyond just delivery. It is going to be tough. But it is almost a part of the journey to understanding how to freelance well and how to build the systems and processes to be successful for years to come. But here are some tips that I'm going to give you to try and shortcut some of these learnings, the ones that were perhaps a little more painful. Firstly, please listen to your gut. If there is an issue that feels like it may happen, it will never just work out. It will never come out in the wash. It will never be okay at the end. A bad start, a bad vibe will set the tone for your whole relationship right through to the end. Furthermore, a lot of clients will try and invoke an emotional response in the words that they say, especially when they don't work for larger companies. I'm paying a lot of money for this. I'm having to scrap together money. This business is everything. I'm putting myself on the line, so on and so forth. This is not your problem. Anything designed, any message that is designed to invoke an emotional response is a huge ick. Listen to your gut. It will not be okay at the end. I'm going to say it again because I am bad at taking my own advice. Listen to your gut. If it does not feel right, it will bite you at the end. You are delaying the inevitable. You may end up doing more work and not getting paid for it, or being, manipulated. Listen to your gut, please. If you take away one thing, it's this: listen to your gut. There are times where you will be desperate for cash as a freelancer. Try and not let it impair your judgment. I have done this several times as an individual, and also when running my agency. We needed cash in the bank to pay our staff. I needed cash in the bank to pay my rent. And I took on jobs that there was an ick, there was a red flag, and I recognized it and I knew it, but I needed the cash. And do you want to know what? Agreeing to do this job today is getting me paid 50% up front. I need that 50% to pay my rent. It impaired my judgment and I ended up paying for it. So just this one is really difficult, because who am I to sit here and say, you need cash? There is an olive branch for some cash. Don't take the cash. But I just want you to exercise your kind of your caution, exercise caution, and just know that, like, if you feel like you should just take a job because you're desperate, there's going to be something that goes wrong with it. Okay. Next, scope your work within an inch of its life. Our discipline, our deliverable, our software, quite often, lends itself very well to scope creep, to extra features, to misunderstandings or assumptions that features would be included. Scope your work within an inch of its life and have your client agree upfront. Make sure that there is very little room for ambiguity. Make sure there's very little room for ambiguity, because where there's ambiguity, each party will try and get their way. You will try and do less work and they will try and get you to do more work. And this can be a challenge for many reasons: financially, time sink, maybe in some places, even the way the project is built would have been different if you knew features existed, costing you even more time. For anything more complex, I'm going to cough, so I'm going to mute my mic. Your eardrums are thanking me. For anything more complex, do a discovery sprint. What does this mean? Oh, you're coming to me with a project. I'm not quite sure how it's going to shape up. It could be a small project. It could be a big project. I'm not quite sure what all the features that are required are. You may be tempted to just say, I'm going to build this thing for you. We'll figure it out as we go. This is how much it's going to cost. Or this is how much I anticipate it will cost. What I would recommend you do, and this is something I unfortunately learned the hard way, is get them to just pay you for a shorter amount of time, a couple of weeks of research, of understanding, of going in and talking to them and understanding all the issues that are faced, what is actually in scope and what isn't in scope. Then what you do is you put together a proposal for the bigger piece of work. This interplays a little bit with taking work because you're desperate. These, for me at least, I took a job because I was desperate for the cash. I didn't do a discovery sprint. I agreed to the fixed cost. It was like an 80 grand project. I got paid like a quarter up front, which was fantastic for me. It was what was needed at that point in time. Didn't do the discovery sprint. And every time we spoke, more features were added. And they thought it was just obvious. Of course, that feature's included. Well, not necessarily. We didn't talk about that, right? The way I saw it working was different. So get them to pay you for a short amount of time and then put together a proposal based on that. They may take that proposal and not do anything with it. They may take that proposal and put it out for tender and someone else may get that job. But what you don't want to do is get stuck with a project that's 2 or 3 times bigger than you think it is because there was a misunderstanding about what was going to be included. On all of this note, how do you price projects? And you just need to decide this, right? Almost up front, but also in these first few projects. Are you going to fix cost projects or are you going to set a day rate and they pay you for the time that you work? Clients like fixed costs, of course they do. They like knowing I'm going to pay X amount for this and no more. But at the beginning of your freelancing career, your ability to estimate the time it takes to do a job doesn't exist yet. It is not a muscle that is well toned. So if you need to fix cost, what do? You fix cost at a higher estimate. So if a client says, I want this at a known cost, you say, okay, well, I think it will cost 1,000 units of currency. If we're going to fix cost it, you pay me 120, you add a 20% buffer. And that is a contingency which will protect you. And almost a fee, I suppose, for the fixed cost. There's still some risks in here. If you really like it, you still have to estimate your time somewhat appropriately, right? Because you only have 20% buffer. But do consider this as an approach if you must do fixed cost projects. This goes without saying, and it's a boring admin task, but you have to contract your work. You have to have a piece of paper that you have both signed that agrees exactly what the scope of the project is. The payment schedule, what your responsibilities are once the project is over. Are you going to host it? Are you going to maintain it? Are you going to bug fix? Because in an ideal world, you want to deliver a project and wipe your hands of it. It's yours now. It's not my problem. There's a bug. You paid me for a deliverable. You signed off on it. You agreed it was done. It's done now. Or that maybe they pay you for the ongoing work of projects. In your first 10 projects, just make sure to be super communicative. If things are not going to plan, communicate it. If things are on track, communicate it. Don't lie. Communication is the saving grace for situations that are not going well. Your clients will appreciate it and it will help you out too. It will help you avoid that dread of needing to break news and delaying it. Also, clients sometimes can be more flexible than you realize, but only if they have the adequate notice to be flexible. Finally, understand that this whole relationship is transactional. You owe no one anything, not a minute of your time. You owe no one on this planet a thing. Someone is paying you for work, for labor. They are paying you for either your time or a deliverable, regardless of how much time it takes. For that, they are going to pay you money. And in theory, they have placed value on your work that is greater than what they're paying you. If you are building a website for a software company, they're hoping to make more money off of that website update than they're paying you. Or if you're building a piece of software, building a web app or whatever. If you are designing an album cover, someone is, that album's going to be sold. That person's trying to make more money than it has cost them to produce all of the artifacts required to make it happen. It is completely transactional. You need to remember, even when you're doing work with friends, which we'll talk about in a moment because I dissuade you from doing this, it's transactional. Someone wants something from you, they'll pay for it. If they were going to someone else, they would pay them for it too. Just remember this. It's really hard because you may feel guilt where you feel like you're not delivering as you should. It is completely transactional. Okay, we're now on your journey of being a developer, being a freelancer rather. Here are some things that not I wish I knew, but I just want to remind you. Firstly, money that hits your account is not all yours. I feel like this is pretty obvious, but I want to say it anyway. When you get paid as a freelancer, your tax, when you get paid as an individual, depending on the country you're in, at least in the UK and in Germany where I live now, tax is taken out and you get given a net amount and that money is yours. You can spend it as you want, save it, spend it, hide it under your mattress, it's yours. When you're a freelancer, you have to pay tax on what you earn. So just remember, you have to be keeping money aside for tax. The amount is different depending on circumstance, country, a whole bunch of things. So another example to engage with an accountant, just remember what hits your account is not all yours. At some point, you're going to have to pay the tax man some money. Next, be savvy when you earn and spend in calendar Q1. This is a more UK-centric thing. The tax year ends April 5th. So Q1, right? So January, February, March, the first quarter of the year, you want to be really savvy when you earn and spend. You want to ideally spend as much as possible so you have as many expenses to lessen your profit. And if you have to get any money off of clients, you want to ideally wait until April to offset, so then it becomes the next financial year and you're not liable to pay tax until the following year. Talk to an accountant about this. It's probably different in other countries. Just know you want to be really savvy about when you earn and spend towards the end of the financial year to limit your liabilities. Talk to an accountant, please. Next, sometimes you've got to do crappy, boring jobs to pay the bills. Freelancing looks like it's amazing and you're going to just work on super fun projects all the time. Sometimes you've just got to do crappy jobs to pay the bills. In an ideal world, you will only work on fun stuff. We don't live in an ideal world. So just remember, for every fun project you've got, for every 3 or 4 fun projects you got, you've probably got one that's a bit crappy, but it's going to be really easy, autopilot, don't have to think about it, or it's boring, it's menial, whatever it may be, but you're still going to get paid at the end of the day. Next, document your work. Everyone, when I was at uni, every lecturer said this to me: document your work, make sure you take screenshots, you record, you document your process, which sounds dull and we never like doing this kind of work because it doesn't feel productive, but quite often you will deliver a piece of work and eventually that work will disappear off of the web. And that is all proof that that project ever happened, gone. So make sure you're taking at least screenshots of that work. Because they will form part of a portfolio now or later. Next, and we spoke about this earlier as well, you can buy in help. If you are struggling to deliver a product or you don't have all the skills required, you can pay someone else to come do part of that project for you, whether it is, whether it is work that you know how to do, but you lack time, or it's a skill you don't have, you can buy in that help. But you have to be sure to protect yourself. Let me give you a short example here. I once contracted a portion of a project out. So I was going to work on a part of it and someone else was going to work on a part of it. To the client, they don't care who I'm giving the work to in this context. Some clients do. You have to be careful about that. But in this case, the client doesn't care as long as the work gets done. But I am the responsible party to the client, not the person I'm paying. That person let me down. It cost me 15 grand. Again, trust your gut. Listen to red flags, like spot them, listen to your gut, have a contract in place, have insurance. This is another thing that can be covered by insurance policies. I would also recommend not working with friends here because it gets awkward. Gets awkward. If you're paying someone who is purely delivering a project for you and they are not delivering what they need, you have some course of action perhaps. When it is a friend, what gets wrapped up in all of that is your personal relationship. Not only making it more awkward, but perhaps jeopardizing it, right? So I would just recommend not working with friends if possible. Your mileage may vary, but I've had it go wrong more than I've had it go right. And finally, in this section, find a community. Being a freelancer can actually be really lonely. You can both be part of many teams as a freelancer, as like a member of those teams on a temporary basis, and part of no teams whatsoever because you're never really in. You're still kind of on the fray. You are often working alone. Now, there is a really nice community by a friend of mine, Andy Bell. It's array.chat. That's the URL. It's a nice community of freelancers. It's just nice, it's nice to have this little community of people. So it's not a free community. I think it costs like $5 a month or something, but I found huge value in that when working alone. Okay, final bit of this talk then. Let's talk about bowing out. How to decide it's no longer for you and how to go ahead and do that. So at the beginning of this talk, I asked you to kind of understand what your motivations are. And that forms part of this kind of set of questions you should ask yourself semi-regularly every few months. Firstly, how much are you banking? Like, money isn't everything, right? Some people I know would take less money but have control over their own work or get to work on projects that they select based on whatever criteria they feel is important. But you ultimately got to ask yourself, like, how much are you banking and how much time are you spending? I enjoyed a lot of the projects I worked on as a freelancer, but I was working 70, 80-hour weeks. Not sustainable. And for that, I wasn't drowning in riches. I was still also not earning that much. And that combination doesn't make sense for me. Doesn't make sense for most people, right? Also ask yourself regularly, as I've kind of implied, is it meeting your goals or motivations? Are you getting the variation in your work? Are you your own boss? And so on. Remember that freelancing also offers the flexibility to look for jobs to leave freelancing. When you work for a company, it is not reasonable necessarily to be doing interviews during work hours because you're working for a company in those hours. When you're freelancing, you are your own boss. As long as it is done appropriately, and you're not charging clients for the time, you can take all the interviews you want. And finally, we're reaching the very end of this talk now. And finally, remember that taking a permanent gig, a permanent job while freelancing and ending your freelancing practice is not a failure. You will have learned so much by freelancing. Even if you then go and stop, those skills don't leave you. So I hope you found this interesting and not too rambly. I felt it was a little, but hopefully there was some value in here. We spoke about getting started in freelancing, some questions you should ask yourself, setting rates and how to do that. We spoke about your first 10 projects, which are going to be rocky, and hopefully that you can make it a little less rocky by immediately knowing what I had to learn. If you take away one thing, trust your gut on the red flags. We then spoke about your career as a freelancer, and finally, how to bow out. Now, as the director of You Got This, it would not be right for me to leave you without letting you know that on June 15th, 2023, we are running a special event called You Got This Fearless Freelancing. It is a one-off event on International Freelancers Day, June 15th, and we will have a set of talks around the act of freelancing and core skills, because there are a ton of skills you need on top of your kind of delivery skills, your actual like skills needed to hand off work. And I think it's going to be really, really valuable. So June 15th, Fearless Freelancing. It's at yougotthis.io now. We don't have tickets available yet, but you can sign up for the newsletter and we will send out a blast when we have tickets available. We're still looking for sponsors, looking for speakers too on this one. So if you have something to give, get in touch. No promises because there's limited slots, but do get in touch. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the You Got This broadcasting service. Thank you ever so much. And I will be speaking to you a little later in this event. Bye for now.